Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix. I am back, and I will be joined shortly here by Rock Castaldo, who has just entered into the green room, as it were. Let me see if I can do something a little bit. Oh, hold on. So I'm trying to get my bearings a little bit. Let's see. That's not going to matter much, I don't think. Uh, all right? I think we're good. So Zoom basically took away my images for my background, which happens every now and then. I don't know why it happens. Maybe Ra Castaldo can give us a clue here about what's going on with these techno Smurfs. We'll call them techno Smurfs that get in and wreak havoc with our little devices and our electronic world. So we're gonna have Raw. We're gonna have Raw for an hour. So why don't we bring him on without any further delay? It is the great Raw Castaldo, ladies and gentlemen. If I had an applause button, I'd hit it. Yeah, it's your buddy Raw. There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm good, brother. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I like your background.
Thank you.
And I like the fact you're kind of glowing, man. I like the glow.
I'm glowing?
A little bit. When you move, you got a little bit of a glow.
If I move closer. Maybe if I move close, yeah.
It's a good effect, though. It works.
It looks all right?
Yeah, no, it's a good effect, right? It's coming off your crown. It looks like your head is on. Looks like your head is on fire.
That's me going into samadhi.
Yeah, it's the effect that you want in this world. So, how are you?
I'm okay, brother. I'm hanging in there. How about you? You dodging landmines over there or what?
Dude, it's all good here, man. I've I moved. So I used to live closer in town, and now I live on 90 acres, but they're not my acres.
Wow.
And I only live on an acre and a half of it, and I'm renting this place. So it's a different vibe. It's a different environment, but I like it.
Nice.
I'm getting kind of primed for country life.
Yeah, I'm thinking about moving south soon. Florida, Texas, something.
Yeah. So you are a little off center, just a bit. The Virgo in me is there. You go. Perfect. And yeah, man. So let's talk about your hair first. I want to talk about your hair.
Oh, dude, my hair are we live?
Yeah, we're live, man.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So my hair is really long, dude. I haven't cut it since like December 2019, pretty much. So when it goes down to the middle of my back when it's out, it's wet too. It's deep. So it's my antennas.
You got your avatar antenna. Like that's what that's about, right?
Yep. Got my avatar. I might cut it soon, but the first 40 years of my life, I had like nice, short, spiky hair. Yeah. And these last 4 years, I've had it long.
I think it's a good move. It's a good move for you.
Thank you. It seems like everybody it annoys everybody else that's close to me but me.
Well, first of all, you have it, so you may as well grow it, right?
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever go bald. It's pretty much. I missed that gene. I got. That's one good genetic I got.
and it doesn't look gray either. So, man.
Oh, I got a few stragglers in there. That's gray, but I guess for turning 44, it's not so bad.
No. So
my dad was gray by now.
You're at the Saturn opposition now in astrology.
Wow.
You got to do something different, man. You got to flip the script.
Yeah. So your changes too. You said you were September 22nd, right? So did you have your changes like 30 years old and 60 years old? Sort of around there?
Yeah. So I was coming off my Saturn return 30, and that was an interesting time. I was living in Seattle, and yeah, I mean, just historically, that was one of the craziest times of my life. Like what was going on phenomena-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a time when I actually had this dream where I stepped into an alternate life. and it set this whole sequence of events in that was really, here, I'll tell it to you. Okay. Cause it's kind of relevant.
Well, it's relevant. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, because you might get a kick out of this. So I stepped through this like plasma, this like wall of plasma that's just running, right? It's like vertical, but it's running like a river. And I stepped through it and I feel like I know this life. I'm living another life somewhere else. It was just weird. And I got up the next day and it was like one of those things just stays with you. Like, what the hell happened there? How do I explain this? So I went to go see this. By this time I'm living in Olympia, Washington. I'm really up in the air. I don't know where I'm going with my life or what I'm doing. Going through a divorce, my first marriage. And so I go to this psychic in Seattle. So she asked me, do you want a reading or do you want me to channel? Well, well, I mean, I'm paying for a show here, so I want you to channel, right? So turn the channel on. Let's see what you got, right? So she said something really interesting. She said, you have 2 alternate lives. One of them is an older man in Philadelphia, and he's getting ready to transition. And another is a younger girl in the Midwest who's growing up fairly poor. Now, what was interesting in my life is that I was having a really hard time with money. I was a hard money. My 20s were all hard money time. And so I thought about it. I'm like, well, what am I really channeling here with this potentially other part of me? And maybe that's, a bleed through from this other experience that I'm having. And then the older guy in Philadelphia. Now, this is the weird part, is that I'd had like all these synchronicities with Philadelphia that summer. It was crazy. It was like strange synchronicities. So I filed that away, right? And then that was in 1990. Fast forward 1996, I'm in Santa Fe, and I'm at a campground in Santa Fe. I was like cruising around the country doing tarot readings. So I had one of the books, Adventures in Synchronicity by Peter Moon. Do you know that? Do you know those books?
Yeah.
Right. So I was reading about the Philadelphia experiment, which had always fascinated me.
Yeah, I know Peter.
Okay. So I'm reading the book, and there's a passage in the book where he's talking about the Philadelphia experiment. And it was my second pass through in the book, by the way. As I'm reading the book, I realize that that's the day he's talking about. Like I'm reading it right there in this campground in Santa Fe. So I wind up going to Taos. I have no money, by the way.
The crazy synchronicity you were getting. Yeah.
Yes. So I have no money, and I wind up, but I have a full tank of gas, and I wind up going to Taos. And I make a connection really quickly with this woman who has this gallery, and she's going to have this Akashic record reader at her gallery on Monday night. So I'm sticking around, and she, kind of liked me. So she let me go for free. So I go in there, and I'm the last person that gets to ask a question. So I ask her a question about the meaning behind reading that thing on synchronicity on the day that the event happens, right? And Philadelphia experiment. She says, well, you have 2 alternate lives. And she nails these 2 lives. And this is 6 years apart and, thousands of miles away. And she gave me more clarity on the older guy. She said he was an engineer and was part of the Philadelphia experiment.
Wow.
So now here's another weird part to this whole story. This is like maybe the third piece. Then we'll jump into you because
I knew Duncan Cameron as well, who claimed to be time traveled and was a part of all that. It's interesting.
So I go to Philadelphia for the first time, and I'm meeting somebody there, a friend of mine, and I get off the plane, and she's arranged an Uber ride. So we get into, first of all, I see the car. I say, "Are you Uber?" And the guy says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm Robert, and there's an Uber car waiting for Robert. Is that you?" And he said, "Oh, yeah. Come on in." So we get in and we start cruising up towards Temple University because we're going out to this area where there's like this retreat. We're about maybe 3/4 of the way to Temple. All of a sudden, the guy gets a call on his phone, and apparently he picked up the wrong guy. Like there were two Roberts, right, that were waiting for this Uber ride. So he just wants to dump us on the side of the freeway. I'm like, dude, you can't do that. Like you know, he wants to go get his fare. So you got to take us to a place where we can pay you and we can, you know, hook up another Uber ride. So he did that, but it was weird. Like there were two of me, right? There were like
Crazy.
strange stuff. Anyway, you were right about that. In 60, which was last year, I moved again from you know, the end of the second Saturn return and moving from being in town in Fredericksburg to out here. So
yeah, you see what some people though, it doesn't always, their Saturn return doesn't always start after their first 29 or 30 years. Yours happened to go that way. Some people they'll start like a cycle at like 10 and then they'll have a big change at 40. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But yours, yeah, it most likely you probably your first 30 years, you probably were going through a period where you in relationships were way more important. You wanted people around you. You had more fears, right? And then you started to emerge out of that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And yeah, that brought me into the 90s, which was a whole other really interesting saga.
Now your 60s, you're getting philosophical, man. Now it's time to, you know, you're going to like become the wise man.
Yeah, man. I mean, my progressed son just went into zero Sag, so I'm ready for that. Little reverence too. So what's going on with you? You're coming in here. This is like a cold read. It's like, Rod, you just come on. You want to bring on whatever you want to bring on, and we're going to go there. So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, since you were talking even about that other self. I mean, see, for those that don't know who I am, real quick, you know, like I mentioned earlier, I'm in my mid 40s and I've been hypersensitive pretty much my whole life. Hypersensitive to not only this physical reality, but also the unseen, invisible around us. And I think that's what we really need to focus on more, is the unseen and the invisible. You know, because that's what really is going on. And it's interesting because it seems like humanity, maybe even like the elites of the world, government, NASA, all these big organizations and businesses, seems like we're searching for a lost coordinate of who we are.
Yeah.
Right. We're in this sort of 3D construct. Right. And it's interesting how even God, right? God is 3-letter word, right? God. It's almost like it's what rules this third dimension. But we seem to be missing a coordinate, but what's in reality, I feel, is that we're actually, Robert, like we're living and embedded in the actual coordinate that we should be searching for. Does that make?
Yeah, it makes sense. And before you go any further, I just want to kind of stack on top of your introduction a little bit. So Ra is an individual that is born gifted with second sight and vision. And we've talked about this on my show a number of occasions, and it had to do with the call wrapped around his head and also the umbilical cord connected around his throat, and how there's a flush of DMT when that happens. So Ra was born with this gift. He comes from a tradition of seers on the feminine side through the Etruscan lineage. And not only that, but he's also a Renaissance guy. He's a musician, a soccer player, a Muay Thai boxer, right? So that gives you kind of an understanding about what he brings to the table here. So I just wanted to fill that in for people that don't know as well, Ra.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Robert. I appreciate it. And for those that don't know, the call is the actual amniotic sac that we're born in. And you know, my mom had an appointment to deliver me. It wasn't like her water broke or anything like that. And it was like a 17-hour ordeal. And then when I came out, I was with the caul around my head and face and my body, and I had the umbilical cord around my neck. And I've done a lot of research into this. And the oldest, actually, this is interesting, Robert. I'm glad you brought it up, because the oldest form of I could find of them talking about this in ancient history is the veil or the net of Neith. Now, Neith is an ancient Egyptian goddess, and she's basically like Isis. You know, it's an older form even, I think. Isis and Neith are pretty much some of the oldest, and Sekhmet, you know, or Sekhet, you know, some of the oldest forms of avatars, or, you know, queen of heavens, or mothers, or, you know, that we have basically to the human consciousness. I mean, these are very old forms of higher connections to who we are. And they talk about the net of Neith being like the cosmic net in the ship of life. And the net of Neith, basically, she fishes her child from this cosmic water. You know, it's the very first prototype that I can find, at least, discussing the call. And, you know, where some people are actually enveloped like I was at the moment of birth, wearing a garment, you know, and the veil and the mother goddess wearing a veil over her head in the depictions is a sign of divinity. It's a sign of being that, you know, come from a lot of different sources. You know, you even picture Isis and the Madonna always born with a veil or having a veil over them, you know, even over their whole body. So it goes really deep when you think about it. People think of it as the seat, the actual amniotic sac around you. The call is the seat of the outer soul. The soul has to anchor to the body through this veil, you know. So there's a lot of mythologies and lore that goes around with it, and it's pretty interesting when you get into it. So yeah, I was already born hypersensitive, and then I think in 1987 during August we were actually having a harmonic convergence at the time on this planet, and I had a near-death experience where I had to be operated on to save my life. And then the following year, which is interesting that we can get into, in June of 1988, I had another experience where I had a massive concussion during my birthday. What's interesting during that time is when Chiron 2060 entered into Cancer, right during that. So that's sort of like the wounded healer. Right. And so that's very interesting as well, because Chiron doesn't come around in Cancer very often, you know. And
are you talking about the asteroid, or are you talking about the Chiron, the star, or
Chiron, the asteroid comet, sort of 2060, and it's also in astrology as the wounded healer. Chiron,
right? So that I
Chiron,
wasn't sure. Chiron, right? Chiron. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So you had a Chiron sun conjunction, is that right, in Cancer?
Yep. Right. During that, right during the week that I had a massive concussion that changed my brain chemistry. Like everything was different. You know, the touching fabrics was different. I was hearing music different. I started playing guitar right after that. Like I was a songwriter, and I was having all these connections. You know, it thank God I actually found working with the copper, because that actually was able to silence all these sensitive areas that were coming to me. I couldn't focus just on one thing. Right. You know, a lot of times, like when I played my music, everything would disappear, and then information would come through.
Right.
Higher information. You know, and everything would come through. The music would just make everything else disappear. Yeah. You know, so that's interesting that you know, Chiron is actually what came into Cancer during that time, and yeah, I think that we are searching for like higher density coordinates in a way, you know, and there shouldn't be a middleman to access higher density, right? It should be happening naturally. And I think society is we're trying to construct little middleman devices, stargates, different things to get us to a higher coordinate. And when in reality, we're embedded in it already. It's in us already. We're part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they're in the Mayan calendar, and specifically the Arguelles version, which is the dream spell. There are portal days in the Mayan calendar with the dream spell, and there are people that are born on those days. Wow. And I don't think it's like that's just a special group of people, although I think it's interesting. But I think it's more symbolic that we're portals. I mean, we are portals.
And it's interesting too, because my mom was a Capricorn January 1st, right? And I'm a Cancer, and my daughter was born January 2nd. She actually went into labor on my mom's birthday. And the Capricorn and the Cancer crab, they're looked at as in old astrology, at least as well. They're looked at as the two gates of the zodiac.
Right, and we have the Tropic of Cancer, we have the Tropic of Capricorn as well.
Yeah, right. And
so
and it's
there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even olden times they looked at like Cancer as the gate where souls came into this physical reality. You know, and even like in Dendera in Egypt, their horoscope and astrology, they didn't have the Cancer as the crab; they had it actually as the scarab beetle.
Interesting. Yep.
You know,
well, and Cancer also takes place during the summer solstice.
Yeah.
which many people believe is the most magical liminal day of the year in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
And of course, Shakespeare, whoever Shakespeare was, wrote the Midsummer Night's Dream, which
Yeah.
is about that particular moment in time. And it was really interesting. I saw this funny thing on, I don't know, one of these like travel channels. It was this English woman who went to Romania to go hang out with some witches on the summer solstice because they believe that's the night with the most juice, right? And then on the other side of that, you have Capricorn, which is the winter solstice.
Yeah. Right after. Yeah.
Right.
No, they're right during. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So you have the winter solstice 6 months later.
Yeah.
And again, a very powerful time.
Powerhouse.
Very, very powerful time. And astrologically, we had major astrological movement over these last 3 or 4 winter solstices, like
Big time.
accelerating all this change that's happening now.
Yeah,
So,
and you can feel it. You can feel the sacred coordinates, the harmonic grid of the planet, pulsating. We're having like these cosmic impulses of change, I think. What's going on right now is there's a war between bacteria and I think technology, nanotechnology, right? And bacteria is what brings evolution. It's what brings virus. It's what brings cosmic change,
right.
It's what brings life. And I think that the messages that's being brought through the bacteria, the codes that's inside the bacteria, we have bacterial phages that carry within their icosahedron head, DNA data, enough data to fill a 400-page book in there, right? And they're these little machines, and they're being sent out by comets, literally being seeded. Worlds are being seeded with change and evolution. And I think that, there's a whole war going on between the bacteria and the nanotechnology and the virus that we're basically embedded in and a portion of our consciousness has. Right. I think, we're almost like a whole bunch of atoms, right? Like if you look at us like into biblical ways, we're Adam, a whole bunch, humanity is in the guise of Adam searching for that lost coordinate, but we're embedded in it already, right? The dream reality most likely is our true spiritual reality that we get glimpses of. And this physical reality is the Maya, is the illusion that we're talking about, because that's the lost coordinate. We're embedded in it already. I think that we're supposed to be getting our head science back to a heart science and our physical science back to a spiritual science together, and until we merge those, there's going to be a big problem right now.
Yeah, I agree. You bring up a really interesting point about bacteria, and there's a story I wanted to share. Yeah. It's an account by an American who went to Russia because he thought that, this is back in the day, like this is like during Stalin, right? And he just thought that being in Russia would be a better place for him, be more, just egalitarian. So they stick him, and he had like a technical background. They stick him in one of these power plants in Magnitogorsk, or like this really northern place. It's kind of cold and hellish, right? So he's there. He's got an interesting story in and of himself. But then there's this guy that they bring in from this area that would be classically known as the Tartars, right? So this guy would be a descendant of that area that would relate to Tartaria. This guy shows up. He can't read a lick, right? Can't read a lick. And he speaks a very different kind of language. And the only job he had was to sit down. And when this light bulb came on, he had to stop whatever was going, right? That was his job for a while. But the one thing that this guy who was the American talked about is that he didn't bathe. And the reason why he didn't bathe is because what was on his body was part of him, right? Like whatever this bacteria, which is what you're talking about, right? Like that was part of him. And he called them his allies. Now, it was very hard to be around the guy because he smelled, but there was a reason why he did that. Like he couldn't think of eliminating those things from him because they were part of him. What are your thoughts? They're
building his immunity, like his immune system too. They're protection almost, right?
Immune system, and maybe something else too. Maybe they were doing some other thing. So the upside of the story, or how it turns out, is that this guy winds up learning to read, learns how to speak Russian, and actually goes on to have kind of a really interesting life, right? but he comes from this very different world, and this bacteria is not considered foreign or alien. It's a part of him.
That's so interesting. Yeah. From, I've been doing, I have a Patreon that I've been posting a lot of them as well, where I've been doing not only working with the copper, but going to certain sacred sites that we have here in the Northeast. We have a red granite dolmen. I don't know if I ever showed you the red granite dolmen in North Salem, New York.
I think you might have one time.
It's got a cat stone. It looks like a cat. The face of it looks like an ancient feline.
Right.
Massive, but it's a healing chamber. Like, it's literally built on a magnetic anomaly. And we could go into it a little bit if you want, but I've been doing remote viewings at these sites, and actually in like copper Faraday cages that I have here, and using copper. And this is where a lot of the information started coming in about the bacteria and the comets and certain locations that we have on this planet that's coming active again. That's awakening. And there's certain reasons why certain things are being unveiled and unburied. I mean, things that were buried are being dug up, like Göbekli Tempe and places like this. These are places that actually, I believe, that are connected to cometary activity and the transport of DNA through the universe. Just like our body is like a microcosm. We have the torus sphere, I think, of who we are, and our biosystem, the sphere of our whole head and everything going around, is connected to the cosmos. And we have torus spheres around our solar system, like the Oort cloud, and then the Kuiper belt. And this is what sends comets. This is the sphere that sends comets, right? And comets are carrying bacteria, sometimes interstellar bacteria that carry DNA. And this is how we get different viruses and I think evolution and things like this on our planet. And I started unveiling through my remote viewings, Robert, you're going to find this very interesting, that ancient Egypt was not only talking about comets bringing bacteria, but they were talking about adding to the elites, like the pharaohs and the kings, adding certain bacteria to the gut, to E. coli and stuff like this. So at the moment of death, the pharaoh can transform to something more. Like with the scarab beetle, right? You're rolling in the dung, in the bacteria, and then it emerges into something more, right? So you can add a bacteriophage that's carrying DNA of the ancients, right? And we have right in our junk, so-called junk DNA, we have an RNA, we have a cemetery of viruses, right? We have ancient cemetery of viruses right in there. So it might be able to even switch on our ancient universal ancestors of viruses that we have right inside of us, right? And Anubis, I can even show you, I'm in the process of writing a book. I have 400 pages done. Been working on it for a couple of years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's all about this. Anubis is not only the lord of the underworld, but he's the lord of the gut, the lord of the intestines, and that is our underworld. The gut is our, you got the heavens and you got our underworld, our other brain, right? So they show actually in the Book of the Dead and other writings, Anubis adding something to the gut and the intestines of the pharaoh and the mummy, so it can transform at the moment of death into something more. Right. Really intense. And the symbols that they have in the hieroglyphics and all of that, they're talking about different bacteria and E. coli symbols, the way E. coli and the DNA sits in it, almost exactly like it. I've been showing it. There's one other lady that talks about it. Her name's Judy something as well. And I agree with a lot of what she said in her book. I found her through some stuff that I came up with on my own way. And then I found her. So it's really amazing when you're talking about the bacteria, because that's exactly what's going on our planet right now. There's that's how you change a species, is by adding bacteria and viruses. It's how you change a species. It's how you bring evolution in some sort of way. Right.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. And of course, one of the developments that theoretically modern science brought to us are antibiotics, which actually do a number on the good bacteria in our guts. And some people have, like when I was a kid, I had spinal meningitis, so they had to like pump me full of antibiotics, which probably did a number. Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure if it was the reason why I lived or not, because I was almost dead. Yeah. But I mean, if people do have to go through an antibiotic trip, or You got to get your gut back in shape.
Yeah, just adding certain bacteria in the gut and probiotics, it could transform your whole personality, your whole everything, right?
Yeah,
So imagine adding DNA of something else. They actually call it horizontal gene transfer. Is when the bacteriophage will actually swap DNA, and I believe they're actually talking about this in ancient Egypt. And I started doing these viewings on comets, on certain places in the cosmos, and on our planet. And it's interesting because going into ancient Egypt, I started to see even more with the scarab. The scarab meant, and when they were actually making these scarab stones, I believe that they were actually laying a holographic layer of information, a bacterial code, different codes of different things right on top of the scarab beetle and placing it in the heart of the mummy. And yeah.
The scarab beetle is totally fascinating. Do you know the story about Jung and synchronicities in the beetle? Do you know that story?
Oh my God, I did read something like that once. Yeah, go over it again. I think it's in Alice Bailey, one of Alice Bailey's books. I think she mentioned it.
So Jung was working with this woman who was a patient of his, and she was going over a dream.
Maybe not Alice Bailey.
And in her dream, she was talking about a scarab beetle in her dream.
Oh no, this is something else that I read. No, this is different. Yeah.
Well, this is really interesting because Jung is kind of walking around his office, listening to her and trying to grok the understanding about the dream. And then he walked over to his window. Remember, he's in Zurich, and on his window there is a scarab beetle that shows up like in that moment. And that bug theoretically shouldn't be there. I mean, it's like, what is it, 3,000 miles away or something like that? It's pretty far. So there it is. And he's looking at this while she's talking about her dream. And then that is the moment that synchronicity is born into Jung's mind. And so he begins to explore this idea of synchronicity. And it has to do with this scarab beetle that shows up right at that time. Right? Like, so what happened? Did the scarab beetle somehow fly to Zurich, or did the scarab beetle somehow appear in Zurich in that moment to reaffirm something that Jung would piece together and would create probably one of the most important psychological concepts of the 20th century. In fact, it was so important, and this is the fun part, is that when you look at Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, all those people on there, Carl Jung is on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. And what's the name of the group? The Beatles, right? So there you go.
Yeah, the Beatles. You're right, dude. It's interesting because even Jesus was looked at as like in old times, like old Christian times, he was looked at as like the scarab god in a way. Like they would put Jesus on scarab stones and stuff. And interesting story about the scarab is a couple of years back, I was writing articles about some of the saints, and Saint Philip Neri was one of them that I was reading about and writing about. And I had an interesting like vision kind of dream about what took place with Philip Neri. And it was almost like a remote viewing, kind of like a movie glimpse of what happened to him. And it went right when I was reading about certain things that happened in his life. I sort of got a deeper imprint of it. My whole body responded to it as well. So for those that don't know, Philip Neri, I think he lived in the 1500s. I think it was in the 1500s, if I'm not mistaken. But, the first part of his life, he was sort of a wanderer and, going around, getting belligerent sometimes, drinking. And then he had a calling. He wanted to change his life. He came to Rome, all of this. So he ended up becoming one of the biggest, he converted tens of thousands of people. He had a whole oratory of things, and he had resurrection miracles. All these miracles happened, but something transformed him, right? And what happened to Philip Neri is he said that one time he used to go pray in the what are they called? The catacombs in Rome. Mm-hmm. Some of them are actually open, that you can actually go in there, like St. Sebastian's, I think it was. So St. Sebastian probably lived, the turn of the century. I don't know. He's the beginning of he's one of the old ones. So, St. Philip Neri was it? Oh, he's in the 1500s. Yeah. So story is that he was down at St. Sebastian's tomb, in the catacombs, and he was praying, and all of a sudden a fire, they describe, came into him, went into his heart, and it changed who he was, right? And actually, after he died, they said that he had broken ribs and an expanded, enlarged heart, like something broke, and they don't even know how he was living like that, right? And his body was like incorruptible for a little while, and until they messed with it, all this stuff. But people that would be next to him said that he was always red and flustered, right? He always had to keep his shirt open, even in the cold. He was always warm. And when he would start to preach, it would feel like thunder. People would start trembling around him, and he would sometimes start to levitate off the ground and things like this, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was reading all about what happened to him, I saw him beneath these catacombs, and he picked a scarab stone up off from one of the areas. The scarab stone sprouted something, and it had like a blue flame, like a blue fire, like a pulsating blue fire. And it went into his chest, into his body, and did whatever. And it was like, it came from an actual scarab, like literally it was like a stone that a blue intelligence came out of, and it entered into him. And this dude, I mean, he's resurrected the dead. He had resurrection miracles. You know, he documented real, brought people back to life. And I'm not sure if it's his arm that they even has as a relic. They use his arm. One of them, they have his arm as a relic. I don't know if it's him or the Jesuit. It might be somebody else that it was him. But a lot of times they use their arm. But his body was incorruptible, I know, for a period of time. Yeah, it seemed, look, they go up a little bit. They talk about something. Where is it? Go a little bit down. He seems to have, in 1544, he had an ecstatic vision in which a globe of fire entered his mouth and swelled his heart to an enormous size. So they're mentioning it right there. But yeah, I saw it actually came out of a scarab stone or something like that. And it's interesting because I was actually doing a whole bunch of trying to do remote viewing. I guess you can call them remote viewings of what's below the Sphinx several times. And I do think what's below there is a sort of hall of records, right? But it's unlike any kind of records that we realize. It has to do with actually the bacteria and all of this. It's like when you walk into this chamber, I think that you can actually lay down into a chamber. It's almost like not a healing chamber or a bed or something, but it's almost like a crystal structure where you can lay in, and it connects not only psychically, but it connects to your DNA in a 6 to 8 foot circle, like torus sphere around you. And it has your bacterial past of your DNA and all of that within that. And you could probably even take sections off it, like in the air, it's in the air around you displayed. And you can actually maybe pull sections off it with your finger and maybe lay it down on a scarab stone or something like that. Highly advanced. And I saw that it was actually attached to the Eridanus River constellation and the South Star that's called Achenar. That's what I was being brought to. And Achenar is a double binary star, the blue star, right? And it's a binary star at the end of the Eridanus River. And they believe actually the Nile River comes from the Eridanus River in ancient times. That's its origins. And the star Achenar, it's interesting because it's a binary blue star, right? And Osiris, who's the underworld, right? God, he's pictured as a blue god a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. And Achenar is below the horizon in Egypt. So it's actually a region of the underworld below the Sphinx right there. And Osiris is the god of the underworld. And in ancient writings, they have this god called Aker or Akar. And it's always depicted as two fierce lions that's below the horizon. So what is two fierce lions that's below the horizon? It could be a binary star that's below the horizon, you know, but and like Achenar, it's two fierce lions, you know, that's depicted as blue with Osiris. Osiris comes from that as well. Osiris comes from Asar, Asar, which is also as Akar. It's actually the origin. So I really feel like the whole hall of records type of structure that's below the Sphinx is actually linked to this binary star Aker or Achenar, and it's powering it somehow. Maybe when it's aligned underneath it, because it's, the Eridanus River and the star Achenar, it's never in above the horizon in ancient Egypt. It's below the horizon. It's a god or a star that's below the horizon. And that's exactly what Aker or Akar, AKAR, is, or AKER is shown as.
Have you ever made the connection between Osiris and Sirius? Because I think there's a connection with Osiris and Sirius, and even the Persian king Cyrus, right? Cyrus the Great, who supposedly is like one of the greatest kings in supposedly recorded history. I always felt like those three words were very linked together: Cyrus, Osiris, and Sirius.
You got Sirius and Syria.
Right.
They're linked, and even the area of Syria, right? You have the god Asherah, right? The goddess Asherah. She said she actually came from Sirius in an egg and landed in a river in Syria, and that's why they named Syria, because she was the mother of Semiramis, who was like a mermaid and a mother of giants and all this stuff.
Now we're getting into some interesting territory here. So we've got about 18 minutes left. I want to ask you about some comets that we have coming into our atmosphere. So you tracking any of these comets like Pan-STARRS, which is
what's interesting too is before we even go into what's coming is the one that just passed, right? We just had Comet Leonard.
Right. I was going to ask you about Leonard.
Yeah. So Comet Leonard, the Christmas comet, it's coming only once in I even have some information here that in my book, because I have a few of these that I've written that are all information that's linked to my readings and my viewings. So Comet Leonard, I felt like too, it's related literally to like a second coming of Christ type of energy, right? Or possibly like a star seed or even Antichrist type figure could be, right? So Arcturus, basically it was moving faster than most usual comets. It was only discovered in early 2021, and it's only going to pass our inner solar system once, right? It's coming from the edges of the universe. So this is not something just coming random. It's coming by during our winter solstice for a specific reason.
Sure. Yeah.
And at this time what's interesting is I was seeing this actually forming what I call the higher density or sixth density bridge with the star Arcturus, with the cometary tail. It aligned with Arcturus about December 15th completely. And I saw this bridge of sixth density sort of impulses being sent to Venus, to Earth, and this our inner solar system through this bridge with Arcturus. And Arcturus is a very interesting star. It even has a stream of stars, 50 stars or so, that's related, the Arcturus stream, that's related to it. So I saw this bridge that is going to be sending these cosmic higher density impulses during this time. So it's very interesting. I mean, it's another one that what is how fast is it? Let me see. The Auteurian Bridge. It's cosmic impulse upgrades basically. But there's a right then, I think it was when I was writing about this at the time, it was right at the handle of Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. I don't know where it is now, but it's on what they call a parabolic orbit, which means that it's coming from basically our Taurus sphere, our Oort cloud, which is the edge of our, our solar system,
right?
The deep regions, and it will never be visible or come around our inner solar system again. It's an orbit, has an inclination of about 130 degrees with respect to the ecliptic, which is what they call a retrograde trajectory, which basically means it revolves around the sun in an opposite direction with respect to the other major inner planets in our solar system, right? So it's coming from the deep inner regions of our cloud, possibly carrying interstellar DNA. It's coming at incredible speeds, faster than most comets. It's only found this year, and it's only going to pass us once during our winter solstice period, right, into January, coming very close to Venus as well, almost touching Venus. And what's very interesting about the sixth density Arcturian bridge that I was like remote viewing, it was like a golden, violent bridge, pulsating electric blue, these cosmic impulses. The comet's tail is involved with this bridge, right? And when we look into information about the star Arcturus, it seems to be like bringing some very interesting details, and I feel that it actually supports my remote viewing. I mean, it's the speeds that it's coming at. I mean, the stream that was attached to it. I didn't even know about the stream when I remote viewed it. I had to research the star, and then I realized that it actually has this stream of stars that's attached to it, and there's a lot of mythology that goes with it. I think Arcturus is in Boots, which is the herdsman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's about 37, I think, light years away. It's like it's like the fourth brightest star, I think, in our sky.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes shown in mythology even as guarding the Great Bear.
Right.
Right. Because it's sort of like of a guard, it's in front of the bear, it's like guarding it in a way, right? And I think they even have like I don't even know if I have it here written down. I know they have like a certain term that goes along with it. What's interesting too is Arcturus was actually chosen in 1933 to have the light of the star Arcturus open the Chicago World Fair that what was it, the Century of Progress?
You mean the Lost Remnants of Tartaria World's Fair, that one?
Right. Yeah. At the time, the astronomers actually thought Arcturus was about 40 light years away, but it's actually 36.66 light years away. So the world's, they wanted it to open the Chicago World's Fair. So the World Columbian Exposition had been held in Chicago 40 years earlier.
Oh, that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. See, the Bear Guard.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So its moment of earthly fame came during the Chicago World should be Worlds, not World, of 1934. There'd been a World's Fair in 1893.
I said 1933. I was a little off.
Hey, you're close enough for lunch. And they calculated that light leaving Arcturus would arrive in time for the new fair. How about that? So if you're
there goes the 1933 telescopes focused the star's light on star. Yeah, they were like trying to pull the light of Arcturus to help with the World's Fair.
Right. So we've got a couple more comets that are coming. It looks like they track the comets in sidereal. So I work with mundane Western Placidus, but we've got these two comets coming up and they're right on top of each other. There's Pan-STARRS on April 20th. So we got 420 sidereal. It's just 5 degrees from the sun. So that's conjunct the sun in sidereal. And then after that on April 26th, there's comet 45P, Honda Mercos, Pagasuakova. And that's at plus 9 degrees in Aries. So we're going to have these two comets. They're going to be within 3 degrees of each other, 6 days apart in sidereal Aries, Placidus, Taurus. What's your take on those two? What do you think?
That's interesting. I haven't viewed that yet, but that's interesting now that you're saying that, because I feel like it has to do with a lot of inner battles coming. That's interesting, like inner impulses.
Yeah, that's when Mars also begins to make its reemergence from behind the sun in late March, because Mars has been occulted by the sun since October of last year. So that's going to be a really interesting time.
Wow.
We got about 10 minutes left here, Ra. You're going to be on another show tonight. You're going to be on Live Leak or what's
I'll be on Leak Project.
Leak Project.
8 p.m. tonight, my time.
Okay. And that's with Rex. Yeah, is that Rex Bear's show? Is that what that is?
Yeah, Rex Bear. Yep. Yeah, dude. It's crazy. I actually, what's interesting too about the time we're living in is, people, they need to learn to silence their mind a little bit and push everything away. Everybody needs everything at the touch of the button. But I think this year is going to have some positive change as well. It's not going to be all doom and gloom like we've been feeling. I actually think that people are going to start waking up a little bit on a bigger level. Some people are lost. Some people are giving up, but I think a lot of us are starting to transition to a higher spiritual self feeling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
I agree. I agree with that.
It's really, people out there, it's really bad. I mean, it's really horrible what's going on, the way people are acting and treating each other. But I think people are also starting to wake up and understand what's transpiring and breaking the hypnosis. Some people are going to be lost, but I think people are starting to wake up out of the hypnosis more. You know, it's really a hard time we're living in. I understand, but we have all the answers within us. You know, we're just confined and trapped in this construct that we're in, but we could break free from that. You know?
I really feel like it's almost a responsibility to treat people better now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're a doormat for people. That doesn't mean that you're gonna just like have no boundaries and discernment, right?
It's like it's like with every generation that I've seen, it's people they're less like real men and real women. Yeah, and they don't know how to communicate with each other, you know. And you know, I know I look young, but I'm in my 40s, and I've been humbled in many different ways. Like I was in group homes when I was younger, right? I've been strangled by a grown man before. You know, that's the most humbling thing in the world, is when another man can strangle you to death and you can't do anything about it.
I think a little more humbling is a grown woman strangling me to death.
I've been strangled by a woman as well. I've been strangled by. Yes.
So you're an equal opportunity victim of neck abuse, right?
There's 130, 140 pound women that I know that can strangle any man.
I'm sure. Yeah,
you get them
rolling. You get a little bit of mag or BJJ in them.
If you don't have any experience, just a blue belt can strangle you.
Yeah, you know, it could be a handful.
Sure, a well-seasoned blue belt could strangle the average person very quick.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Like, do you have anything at like 26 Taurus in your chart? Because that's
I'm not sure. I don't go into that part of it, but it's interesting how, like, you and Masaki are more into the astrology, but it's interesting how when I do readings, it lines up exactly with the chart. So I come from it in a different way, but it's pretty interesting how we and you know, we are at a time of a reset. I mean, think about that word reset. You got Re, which is the sun god, the god of light, and then Set, which is the god of dark, right?
Yeah.
The collision of the two.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Right in the word.
It's a great connection.
Yeah.
Well, I want to have you back on again. Let's try to do something maybe in a couple months. Maybe when Mars comes back.
Yeah, we'll have you on my show too. And for those that don't know, the Mystical Spiral store, I got copper harmonizers, crystals. I'll do a giveaway for somebody today if they want to contact me. Anybody who wants to make a purchase, I'll send them free products. Cool. You know, so yeah, we got all sorts of harmonizers and things like this. So real nice stuff. So anybody contact me. And yeah, it's the copper really works even if you have physical ailments, you know. Right, if you even put like a copper ring, you could tuck it in. If you have a belly ache, you could tuck it in your chest part, and then use one of the coils to pull out the pain from the middle.
Yeah,
right. It really works, and it really helped me be able to silence my mind and maybe get me to a higher state to receive information. Yeah, the megalithic sites is another interesting thing we could talk about next time, because the chamber that we have here in North Salem, New York, that I discussed, it's also like a seed enhancement chamber. You know, there's granite, for those that don't know, actually emits radiation and ionizes the air. And
just look at the radiation levels in Colorado.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like if in New Hampshire, it's like the granite state, right? So and you go into like any store, hardware store, stuff, and they have those radon detectors, right? You have to have them if you have granite in your homes, if you have granite tops, because even though it's at a low level, it emits radiation. And if you keep your windows closed, it'll build up. It could lead to cancer over time. So you always got to keep like a window cracked and circulation in those granite homes. You know, it could do that because it ionizes the air. They actually have these chambers in Carnac, France, like Saint Michel, Saint Michael, where there's these granite mounds. It's this granite like 50 feet high, stacked on top of each other with chambers on the inside. that have these highly ionized airs, and they're possibly, I believe they were originally made for seed enhancement treatment centers. They charging seeds in there for the harvest.
I think we're going to need some of those. I've heard about that, by the way. You're not the only person that's talked about that.
Yeah, there was another guy that wrote about it. His name was John Burke, and he wrote a book called Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty.
Yeah, David Dubine talks about that book. Many Ice Age conversations. That guy
changed my life. That book, man, it got me into a lot of things, and it's the reason why I got that book is because the North Salem stone, the cat stone that I go to. I've known about it since the 80s. My father used to deliver oil on that street. We used to always see it. He mentions that book, that rock in his book, that dolmen in his book. So that's why I eventually went and got the book, because it's the only book that I knew that had that rock discussed in it. So it's really amazing. He discusses that, and they're called these grand tumulus structures that are in that's what they call them in Carnac. There's like a half a dozen of them in Carnac, France.
Right.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Cool. All right, Ra, it's been great.
Thanks, brother.
We'll have you back on again shortly. We'll get into more of this fascinating material, and maybe I can tick you a little bit with some Tartarian stuff next time.
Yeah, I love that.
We can explore that. And
how do you think that relates to like Tartarus, the underworld
I mean, it's a mud flood. It's a mud flood, right? There's a mud flood.
Do you think it was an underground civilization all over the world?
I think part of this, clearly, I think there's underground civilizations. I think it's a civilization that got buried underground as well when you look at the mud flood. So when you come back on, we'll do a little exploration with some Tartarian.
Cool, no doubt, Robert. Thanks for having me on, brother. I appreciate it.
It's great having you, man. It's been too long. So you have a great day.
Yeah, way too long.
All right.
Love you, buddy. Stay safe.
Yeah, right on. Cool. The great Castaldo. How about that? That was awesome. He's always got great shit to talk about, making really interesting connections. Unique. Ra's got a really unique perspective. You're not going to find a carbon copy of Ra anywhere. Speaking of rare, let's bring on Beth Martens here. We're going into hour number 2. So we started off with the cosmos way up there. We're going to bring the conversation down to the planet. And we're going to talk about activism, politics, and how it might relate to the development of our spirituality. Because I know Beth is doing a lot of work around this. Let's catch up with her. Let's bring her in here. There she is.
Hello, Robert.
How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah.
I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is my happy disco shirt, even though I fucking couldn't stand disco music. Yeah. So I was thinking of on my green screen. Then I realized I got some mermaids right there. Right there, they are.
Oh, you got some mermaids. Oh, wow. Where are they? There they are. Oh, yeah.
Mermaids. They're
okay. Okay. Nice. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Is that a flat earth?
I don't know what this is. There's this guy named Dino. He has a Tartarian channel.
Okay.
So I think this is from his website. And I thought this is pretty cool. So I put it back there. So how's it going up there in the great white north?
Oh, it's excuse my language, shit show. Just lots of restrictions. Can't get on a plane if you're not jabbed. Internal or international. They're looking at making the country like a nationwide vaccination mandate.
Canada is
mandation.
Canada is just slightly north of Australia when it comes to this totalitarian stuff that's going on.
We're just one season behind.
Yeah.
That's everything they've done in Australia, they've done here, but they just pushed it back on the time scale, which is fascinating too. Right.
So where are you? Are you in Calgary? Where are you?
Winnipeg, Manitoba. So it's,
Winnipeg, Manitoba. Okay.
Yeah, South Central.
All right. So I just read that the truckers are not going to be made to be vaccinated.
Amazing.
But American truck drivers going into Canada,
Yeah.
They will be.
Right.
Which means that you're going to have truck drivers who do not want to be vaccinated who will not drive into Canada, which is not great for Canada because you guys get a lot of stuff from the United States.
Yes. Good point. Good point. Thanks for filling me in. Yeah. 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 Darn it.
So what's your daily routine like in an area where the walls are closing in? How do you deal with it? What do you do?
To tell you the truth, it's no different from me because my world is very self-contained, and I'm self-employed, so I don't have an employer telling me what to do. So the worst the government's done for me is knock on my door a lot to get me to fill out the census that they said you would go to jail for if you didn't, and proved that wrong because I just ignored them.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was mail that was not addressed to me, so that was one of my first steps in law, just was to see how if they actually don't address you, then you have absolutely no obligation to respond. Even if they do address you, it's not an obligation. But so yeah, that was good.
So I want to get into that, but I want to show people your website here really quickly. And then we could talk a little bit about you as well. There she is, where mastery meets magic. And you do a lot of work with the king hero archetypes and archetypes in general.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time you were on the show, I was really blown away by your ability to relate kind of these archetypal energies in an urgent way for the times that we're in. Like some people can talk about it from an idea place. You were talking about it from a very horizontal, like this is what we need to do, borderline plan of action, interpretation of these energies. So tell me a little bit more about how you were able to kind of dip into some common law here and using this theme of authority, which is very much like the king or the queen or these royal archetypes, that you were able to push back on the government there.
Yeah. So to me, that any limitations you have on the things that you want and need to do, but maybe aren't doing or are doing badly, you can trace back to your inner world here. And that's why archetypes are such a valuable tool, and why I saw, when this whole pandemic hit nearly 2 years ago, that this work was more important than ever. It's not just to congratulate myself for being so smart, but just to see that people are stuck, and not only people who wear masks and take injections are stuck, but we're stuck up in higher energy, which when you're in the higher energy, you're not afraid to look at something frightening that, yeah, this is an agenda. Yes, there's a attempted genocide going on here. But to see yourself in that role of being so responsible for your what you're putting out, and the unconscious hidden motivation behind it, because that's the thing that, to me, everybody has a blind side. We should all be learning in kindergarten how to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, the studies in the law came really just as a sense of obligation. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like it. I never wanted to look at it. Like until a few days ago, I didn't even know what the word acquitted means. So I'm still very much a beginner in this world. I didn't want to go to court for sure. So I was studying law as a means to stay the heck away from courts.
Right.
But, here we are. I'll tell you a little bit about the action that we took, so you have a sense of it. That so we have in Canada a system where our officials up the chain, so for example, here was the cause. Here was the line in the sand that was drawn, and I was not willing to just leave it behind. So they announced that a 12-year-old could go and get a poison injection without any parental consent or awareness, right? They could just show up, even an 11-year-old, if they were going to be 12 in that calendar year, right? So what can an 11-year-old do to reason and think through these situations and look at long-term effects and weigh all those decisions that, in fact, their parents will have a difficult time if they do diligence in it.
Right.
And
right.
So this was over the top. And I was hearing about kids that would go and get an injection to spite their parents, or to, because they wanted to go to the hockey game or something like that was so frivolous and so short term. That's why children have parents. right? That's because we're there to
Right.
make decisions for them.
Right.
And,
Right.
so I had been studying, and we'd even been working on notices. I still didn't even see myself sending them. I've been growing myself up out of, if you want to archetype it, it's the child archetype that
Yes.
is in denial,
Yes.
afraid of being betrayed, afraid of being abandoned. That if you, and this was the most of the people in my life, that they ended up not taking action just out of those fears. But to me, this line in the sand was too stark. It was too sinister.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, that's it. We're doing this. So we put a 28-page notice together. It took us 5 months to write, totally original from a perspective of that all of these perpetrators up the chain have signed an oath to the Queen,
Right.
taken an oath to the Queen. The Queen took an oath to uphold the Christian faith. And so that's what the appeal is based on. And I know it's not a technical appeal, it's a notice of conditional acceptance.
Right.
And so we went through 3 rounds of that notice, and a notice of default and dishonor. Now we're working on an affidavit, and then we're working on court process. Because at this stage of the game, some people do back off when it comes to 1 notice or 2 notices, or, they get scared, they see the liability and they back off. Whereas these guys that we're dealing with, because we were chopping at the head of the snake, the actual decision makers, then all they do is go and show paperwork to a lawyer, and the lawyer says you don't have to respond until it becomes court process.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of where
we're
we're
going
at.
through something similar here in Fredericksburg, and I know you saw the video because you were in the
That was excellent.
chat that one day. So
Yeah.
we're kind of the other arm of that thing. It's interesting how you guys in Canada have to appeal to the fact that the Queen swore an oath to uphold Christendom and Christian principles, whereas here we're dealing with the Constitution, which is again this document that supposedly holds some weight and some depth and an agreement between the people and the so-called state. It's a really different kind of dynamic. So, has anybody done this using this model with the Queen as it relates to these principles? Where because there are constitutional examples here in this country based on what we're doing. But are you guys like blazing new trails up there with this?
In some respects, yeah. So the work of Cal Washington, where was, oh, you've got a beautiful cat.
She's a pain in the ass.
Mine too. And so the work of Cal Washington was our clue. He's creating a mass action notice of liability that's going to go out from every corner of the earth. It could have, by timing that was planned, it should have happened already. I can't say what that means. I know Cal Washington has very strong faith himself, and he knows that perfect timing is everything, because you can do the right move at the wrong time.
And who is Cal Washington?
Cal Washington is the creator of In Power movement. So he's here in Canada, and he'd been through a lot of incredible trials and tribulations just over a divorce, and losing his kids and having to go through all of these hoops. And he just wasn't willing to sit back and be crushed by the courts, because when you don't know how to use them, then they take every opportunity to it's hard to say how actually sinister they are. I've heard them painted incredibly sinister, and now I'm getting a little bit of a different perspective that they're actually there for us, and we just don't know how to grow up and learn that stuff. And actually, court procedure is relatively easy. It's not like what I've been doing for the last 18 months, which is to a little bit more like trailblazing, but picking up on some of the bigger people who've had a lot of experience, like Robert Menard and Robert Michael, a couple of Roberts there, and Tom Barnett and Alphonse Fagiolo and Dr. Frederick Graves. And, all of these people have experience to offer. So we've just been pulling from what we see is what we can resonate, because one of the things you can't do in law and be very successful is copy paste. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of templates out there. What they end up lacking is your own intention. and your own work. Because when you sit down and you make original paperwork, your heart and soul pours into it. You have to be able to get behind every single word of it and understand, so that if you are, taken to court over it, then you can speak in a way that's actually going to be, accurate. An affidavit, you swear under threat of perjury that it's all true. So you need to know what you're talking about. And I feel that there's a lot of power in that originality with it, even if you make mistakes. So I'm always looking for people that are having success, and hearing some of those people out there that they didn't do everything right, but because the court saw that they had, they're lucid, their motivation was clean. So this comes back to the archetype work. We don't understand our motivations. We can be really high on ourselves and full of pride and courage and anger, that those three are a really good mix. But if underneath all of it is really fear, then just like a dog, the courts smell it, right? So they know where you're coming from. And if it's sheerly self-protection and no higher purpose, then they always have a way to loophole you, from what I understand, into, basically giving over jurisdiction is what it comes down to. Now, it's even debatable about jurisdiction, whether this is such a precipice that you don't want to give them that. It's just that once they have it, you have to be so aware, is what I'm starting to understand. Even hiring a lawyer, I would have said not very long ago, never do that. They are married to the devil and you don't want to have anything to do with them. But even better would be if you hired a lawyer, that you would be constantly studying and understand what they're doing and be able to micromanage them, so that they don't get, like, according to Dr. Frederick Graves, most lawyers are just lazy. They don't want to work. They don't have any real impetus. And here's one more thing that seems to be really quite a beautiful effect in law, is that you're not just trying to save yourself, right? In our action, I even came to a realization at some point that I may not be able to save my own child. He has a life. He's out there. He lives with his dad. And, so his dad feels differently about all of this stuff than I do. But so some people might have given up then. Why would I bother to go through all of these gymnastics and put so much time and effort in and try to rally other people as well, which didn't work that well. But I just started seeing, okay, if I can't make a difference in my own family, then maybe I can make a difference for other children, get things turned around at the school division. We got up and spoke at a meeting, the school division here. I had a colleague who was doing the notice with me. She was brave enough to do that. So she said, would you come and speak at this meeting of the trustees, the school board, making decisions? And so I was just kind of praying to God what was going to come out of me. I did plan some things. I had a great talk with a mentor the night before. And I basically served them a notice of liability live on this call. And, these people are so impenetrable, so far impenetrable. If we have reached them, then they're obviously not, they're just scared of whatever backlash they would have if they spoke out. Mm-hmm. But what happened is the community came out of the woodwork, right? So everybody listening that wasn't allowed to participate reached out to us and started gathering and, taking some small actions. But
all people need is just a little sense of permission. That's it, right? And the permission is, oh, there's somebody doing something. Maybe I should get involved here. Or it may not even be that. They may not even have a question. They're like, oh, they're doing what I want to do. I want to do it. It could just be that immediate because I've seen it here in the Hill Country. I've seen it here in Fredericksburg, and the response has been, really positive, and like kindling on a fire is really what it's been like. So
amazing.
I mean, you can't underestimate the effort of maybe just 2 or 3 people who are committed, and how that can really turn the tide in a lot of ways for other people to get on board. So I wanted to ask you a question, kind of more of a metaphysical question. Mm-hmm. But so you're dealing with these people that you're serving notices to. Okay. And there almost seems to be an archetype for them as well.
You said it before, the king.
But they're remote, they're unreachable in a lot of ways, and they may be lower kings or petty tyrants who've been empowered and given too much power for the position that they're in. But it's almost as if they're part of like a network in some ways. And some of it may be intentional, and it could be a real network, or maybe a network that is just energetic. And I know you're sensitive and you're intuitive. What's your read on these people that are in these positions and they're entrenched and almost having to be pried out of there with a crowbar with the paperwork and the intentionality? What's your read on them?
Yeah, you definitely nailed it with the king archetype. And I've been studying this so strong to try to understand what is this? What is the nature of that evil? That there was a time I didn't even really believe in evil, but now I see it for what it is. And I'm learning to make a distinction because the archetype work is always dealing with shadow, right? So, and what does shadow mean? Many people have paired up shadow and evil. Now, they can come as a pair, but that's not the inherent nature. So we just, innocently have things we don't see about ourselves. And they're going to try to get your attention one way or another. They're going to erupt in some kind of, chaos or things you don't want to be happening, results you don't want, bad health, but, falling down a relationship, money trouble, whatever it is that shows up. Now shadow, because there's an unwillingness to see it, the shadow of the king, they struggle with power, right? Mm-hmm. They need power in order to lead their kingdom. And if they don't have a higher power, if they don't have God to answer to, then they become corrupted. They are working for power. They're working for something. This is the whole satanic thing that and this is the claim in law, by the way, that Satan claims to be God, to have the same power as God, to be on par. And God's going, no, let me create human beings to prove that, in fact, they have a supremacy over evil. and excuse me, this is what we're meant to do inside ourselves, is to prove God's claim, to come clean, right? So the king archetype, that those that are in that position, if they don't have God and that direct check with authority, they feel like they are the supreme, the sovereign, which in fact means to reign over. Mm-hmm. And that's not what we are. We are children of God. That's the true nature of it. When you have God, then you have a constant relationship to keep you in check, to mm-hmm. keep you in conscience, right? Something happened yesterday. I can't talk about it. It's a little bit behind the scenes, but it was like a knife in my solar plexus, not from anywhere, but just because I knew I had gone wrong somewhere and I needed to make amends. And I felt the pain of that, and it, instantly went into prayer and saw it inside myself, and very quickly found a path to remedy. I don't want to leave a wrong on the table. I'm going to turn around and do what I can to redeem myself. And this is a beautiful distinction, because, this is all the work we're doing in laws, to redeem ourselves, to come into honor, to show ourselves not as babies who need to be spanked and pushed around and done everything to, but that we can stand and take responsibility for ourselves. That nobody wants to do that. They all want somebody else to control them, make their decisions, make their choices, whether in health or in law or anything. None of us study law. We should be since kindergarten, always studying the law, mm-hmm. because it influences us more than anything else. Give me 1 second, my sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, frog in my throat. And so, yeah, that king, when you see the tyrants out there that are willing to perpetrate harm on children, never mind adults, it's bad enough, but the Bible says that to harm a child is the worst crime, right? That we all know it. They are the innocents. They can be manipulated and wielded. You take them for an injection and they might protest. In fact, they often do. I've worked in a hospital as a musician long ago, and hearing the kids scream about vaccinations, holy man, they knew.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But they're being overpowered, and
Right.
and of course the parent thinks that it's in their best interest. So I was actually attacked as a child. They lied to me, going to the doctor, telling me there was going to be no needle. I planned in advance. I said, okay, I'll go to the doctor, but I'm not going to let them put anything in my body with a needle. And so they lied to me. I went, and I thought my checkup was over. I'm all happy. I'm leaving. And they grabbed me and jammed a needle in my arm.
So who lied to you? Was it your parents or the doctors?
Both. Collusion.
Right. So the parent thing, that's a rough one, right? That's hard.
Yeah, I'm still healing.
That's a big betrayal.
Right. Exactly. And so how do you,
And it's really disempowering. I mean, literally they hold you down, and these authority figures aren't being upfront. They're not being transparent. They're not honoring the agreement that they had with you. And then they literally violate you.
I know. And it's where we're at en masse. And it's been all our life. It's nothing new, actually. So it's fascinating that they're just trying to take their same old trick now and take it to a new level.
Right.
So yeah, so that king archetype is one to be very aware of in yourself. I encourage people to find the way that they're meant to lead right now, whatever it is, whatever way you can contribute and be part of this movement of not adhering, not understanding the authority that we truly have. So the victim archetype, for example, this is one of the primal archetypes that I teach about. And the victim, in its lower energy, it feels like it's at the mercy of perpetrators, and you just, lay on your back and show your belly and let them have you. And then virtue signal to others about what a victim you are. You get a kind of fake power out of that. Right. Now, if you're up the scale, then you start actually becoming the perpetrator. And like a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. In the truth community, calling people out, calling them mastards, being angry at them, shaking them, trying to wake them up, trying to scare them. Right. So you end up in the same trouble. Whereas true authority, once you start to get into that, you see, oh, the law is written on my heart. Mm-hmm. Right. This is something that if I'm internally aware and I know my motivations and the difference between fear and love, which sounds so simple. Mm-hmm. But it's not. We're talking Cain and Abel, right? The one who runs from death is dangerous compared to the one who runs to life is full of life and full of energy. And I am so sorry, Robert. Could I have just 1 minute? I have a cat in the way too cold. Speaking of cats,
go take care of your cat.
I need about 30 seconds to let him in. I'll be right back.
Go do
My
that.
apologies. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so we're having a cat break here with Beth Martens and getting into some interesting territory around victims, kings, victimizers, heroes. This is an interesting time because all that material is getting just turned over. Right, turned over, and we have to examine where we are with all of it. And one of the things I want to bring up with Beth is this idea of how this is kind of a cosmic setup in some ways. But there you are. So is your cat okay?
Just fine. Yeah, it's too cold to leave him. It would be cruel.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you: did you ever ask your parents or talk with them about that situation?
No, and it never really came into focus until this year, and they've already passed.
Oh, wow.
So I lost my parents 2015 and 2017. Very interesting timing because I was just waking up, right? I was just coming to and seeing how messed up the world really is. I knew things weren't right, but I hadn't put it all together.
Right.
And seen the wholeness of it. And it would have been really intense with my parents. It might have been a split, like so many families are breaking up.
Did you grow up in a religious family with a religious background?
Good question. So I come from Christian roots. My ancestors were persecuted for being Christians in Russia. Several of them were murdered. They fled to Canada to be here, and were defending the faith, right? My great-grandfather went to jail several times for preaching the gospel as a school teacher. And so that's in my roots. And then when I was very young, my mother told my dad, "You're not allowed to send money to church anymore. We're trying to raise kids, and this is stupid. We're trying to get ahead here, and you can't do that." She just didn't agree with it. So they kicked them out of the church because they couldn't pay.
This isn't the Orthodox Church, is it?
No, Mennonite.
Mennonite. Okay.
Yeah,
so they were kicked out because they couldn't pay the church.
Yeah. And it turns out my mom just wouldn't let my dad do it. So it was, she just drew a line in the sand, didn't adhere to that religion at all.
Yeah.
And then, but as a child, by the time I'm 11 and 12, 9, 10, 11, 12, I personally took an interest in Christianity. And became a born again Christian independently. So I went to Bible camp, and I was actually quite evangelical. I would go and try to convert people. I remember converting my cousin and putting.
That must have been a high. Was that a high for you?
It was, right. I was one of those kids that was willing to stick their neck out, and then I flopped. I spent the rest of my life, I actually flopped at that point and became a very wayward teenager. I dabbled in Satanism. I was being groomed for a satanic cult.
You're shitting me. So you went from being a born again Christian, and then you said, "Okay, I'm kind of done with this, and let me check out the other side of the tracks." And you how old were you?
Then by that point, I'm 15, 16. And I was seduced and groomed.
Yeah. How did that happen? Can you talk about how that happened?
Yeah. It was one of those best frenemies who, paid a lot of attention to me, appeared to think I was so great. And I, raising my status, your personality is so fragile as a teenager. You need people to validate you. And, so I became this fixture in her life, and she very much controlled me and was, it was a drip system, just a little bit at a time, like she had a system or something like that. That's how they get you.
So she was raised in this network, right? She was raised in the system.
It's very possible. It
sounds like it to me. It sounds very sophisticated in some ways, like almost indoctrinated. So she was giving you little drips at a time.
Yeah.
What were you? And so when did it manifest to you that you were like all of a sudden, like way on the other side of the kind of cosmic divide here?
I got thrown in jail, and I realized things went too far. I became a runaway. I was on the streets. I was shoplifting to survive.
Wow.
I never did, not even for myself. She had me doing stuff for her, right? So that's how they do it. They get you to do things that are out of integrity. You start to actually go into your unconscious. You hide whatever you hide from others. You hide from yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It sends you into the unconscious. And so, it was just these little nickel and dime. And then next thing I luckily got thrown in jail.
Yeah.
So it was so good because I'm like, holy crap, what's going on here? This is out of control.
Right.
And I was very lucky that my parents decided I was able to come back home. Hers didn't want her. It was like she was off. It was the end of her being parented days. And so I got sent home. I had a chance to redeem myself and to begin to heal from what I had been through. Got a lot of help and, took the straight and narrow path. After that, I became a straight A student. I got the gold medal in university. I just hunkered down, tried to be, a good person for a change.
So when you say satanic, I mean, was she openly satanic? Did you read like the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But little drips. It was always just the next level, the next ritual, the next kind of escapade that we would pull off as teenagers.
Wow. Do you know what happened to her?
Car.
Do you know what happened to her?
I write about this all in my book, by the way. I don't, I lost track of her. Pretty sure she changed her name. Mm-hmm. And, there was one time when I heard she was traveling with a band and dancing for them on stage. I think that was my very last Yeah, I haven't heard of her, but I'm pretty sure if she's still alive, she would be under a different name. That was pretty dark.
Wow. So you just, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's all
Uh,
in my book here. If you want to see,
yes.
I wrote I
Let's
wrote
see the
about
book.
all my escapades.
Beth Martin's journey. I
Yeah,
love it. That's great.
yeah, a map of archetypes to find lost purpose in a sea of meaninglessness. Because as long as you don't have purpose, and that's what teenagers don't have. That's why they're so
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah. 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 They are. I mean, they've just absolutely gutted this idea of purpose and, finding one's niche in this world in an honorable way. It's just been completely gutted.
You got it.
Um,
You
yeah.
got it. And it's about service, right? Purpose is service. It's
Hmm.
how you fit into the fabric of humanity. And
Yeah.
how you naturally give, how you naturally receive, how you assume responsibility for that. How are you going to be taken care of if you don't have a place? Every elderly person knows that if they don't have a place in life, then they don't have a life. They
Right.
often will die.
Yeah.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so when your parents took you back home, do you think in some ways they redeemed themselves for theoretically betraying you to the medical mafia when you didn't want to get that shot?
Oh, I never thought of that at all. If I was punishing them for the whole life about that. Yeah, I never even considered it. It's they were just trying to do the best they could with a very chaotic situation. And I was a rebel. That was the archetype that I write about extensively. It's what I was dying of when I got diagnosed with cancer at 29, and trying to contend with that fight element that's inside of me, how to use it. Now coming full circle with the law, and learning so much discipline, right? Not to rail against the machine like I did as a kid and as a teenager, to have purpose, very clear focused purpose, because otherwise you fight everyone and everything, and you walk in a world that is saturated with conflict at every
Hmm.
turn. Now I still create conflict, but very carefully,
Hmm.
mindfully, and for the right reason.
Right. Right.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I have two. Yeah, yeah.
What are they like?
Not like me. Not so much like me at all. No, no.
Right.
More, much more interested in the government, in the system, in medicine. Both of them are, one's in is a minister, United Minister, but works for the hospital. The other
Mhm.
is a nurse for the hospital. I have aunts and uncles, doctors, they're nurses and administrators. So they're very bought in to the medical system. And so last year I was pretty much pushed out of the family, although to be fair to them, I think they didn't see anybody or anyone. I wasn't special, but
Right.
I was pretty rejected by my family for taking a trip to New York last summer when they thought that was just the most evil thing I could possibly do, bring back all this sickness to Canada. And that turned out to be not true at all.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, speaking out has been costly. Definitely lost, as I'm sure all of us have, friends, family, but attracted a whole new level of community and like-minded people. All my best friends are new, but that's great. I've still have very true, authentic connections, which is what we're here to do, right? We just
Hmm.
want to be ourselves. That's back to purpose, back to all of the archetypes. When we awaken them and act through them in a clear way, express through them, then you have a kind of superpower.
Hmm.
Like life can flow through you. There's not a whole lot of resistance. You're not invested in constantly trying to censor yourself so that people don't see, they only see this, but they don't see this. You're
Right.
not jockeying. You're not actively working to keep people's love and approval. You risk having personal authority.
Hmm.
And if people like that, great. And if they don't, that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
I'm always taking that risk. And I'm always actually incredibly gifted with the realization that the more I can be transparent and who I am, the easier it is to
Right.
attract community.
Yeah.
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 Great.
Yeah.
That's all. That's really a lot of growth there, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I
Um,
share about a couple of things? Oh, sorry, you have a question?
yeah, no, I was going to, yeah, but go ahead. You can share a couple things. Sure.
In case I forget about it, I just wanted to shout out if there's any of those in your audience that are in Canada or even in Manitoba. There's a couple, speaking of the law, there's a couple of law groups, because when I saw how difficult it was for people to find their own personal authority and take action in law,
Mhm.
I realized I needed to create some kind of forum where they could grow up in law, study, to get some basic knowledge about who they are. We don't know who we are at all.
Yeah.
When somebody says, Beth Martens, please stand up, you're just like, oh, I learned how to do that in kindergarten. Here I am.
Right. Right.
And so we have a Manitoba Lawful Action group that you can join. There's no cost to it whatsoever. There's a Telegram group where people are sharing a lot of knowledge, helping people to get out of those baby steps, give some direction if you're losing your job or you're facing some kind of situation in your life, which everybody is right now. And then we also created the Canadian Court Procedure Study Group. This one is even more serious because those ones are willing to take action in court. And
those are those on Telegram?
Those are both on Telegram. And then the Canadian group for court procedure, we have Wednesday night meetings. We've just had 2 now, and we're studying the work of Dr. Graves through his jurisdictionary course with all the court procedure. And we've got a ton of really knowledgeable people in this group. It's so exciting because it's one thing to be one person and just kind of doing your thing. But when you gather 2 or more, right, then you start to have power in a different way.
Yeah, real magic starts to happen. I've seen it with this group here in the Hill Country, and it's like this force that just begins to accumulate momentum. It's fascinating. I mean, we're on the precipice of really sculpting our consciousness in a very different kind of way now. And on the one hand, you have to look at what's going on with these perps because they're part of that process, right? It's like, okay, you guys are doing this thing over here. You're forcing us to do this thing over here. And we wouldn't be doing this thing over here if you weren't, being obstinate and whatever over here. Criminal. Right. Yeah. So we're in collusion with one another, and I think it's interesting to look at like people like you and myself and other people that are taking some kind of action and how it's causing us to grow and to grow up and to mature because we're in this Capricorn phase astrologically, which is really what's happening. And I'm not invested in what happens to them because you really can't be, right? We can only be invested in what happens with us. But on the other hand, I am curious about how some of these things that we're doing is impacting some of these people and how it is beginning to creep into their consciousness a little bit. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. So we have a city attorney here in Fredericksburg, and I mean, I really don't know him very well. I've known him through the meetings and through a few things we've done with the city. Pretty mild mannered guy, and we had a city council meeting where the city manager essentially lied and said that we could take this federal money and it's just like any other grant money, right? He said that, and we knew what the contract said, and that's not true, right? There are all these hooks and clauses inside of that very simple contract, a 2-page contract, which said, if you take this money, you're going to be responsible for X, Y, and Z, including executive orders and things like having to work with the government's contractors, the ones that they want to use when you use this money, right? So all these things, we brought them up, and we brought them up before the city manager basically, it's just another grant. Don't worry about it. We do this all the time. Well, the attorney for the city had to refute him and rebut him 3 times in public after that. Like, you got to be kidding me, right? He said 3 times, they're right, they're right, they're right. So, and I don't know if it's because of what's happening, but he's trying to run for judge. The city attorney's trying to run for judge because the judge is retiring, which means he wants out, right? He wants out. And then last night we have this thing called the Tea Party. You might have heard of it, right? So the Tea Party here in the Hill Country is pretty active. And so we had a candidate for governor, a couple of local candidates were there. Who do I see at this Tea Party gathering? The city attorney, who's running for judge. Now, he wasn't there to politic, but I was kind of shocked, actually. It's like, oh, look who's here. And I shook his hand, and he shook my hand with a really firm, enthusiastic grip. So I'm thinking something's happening here, right? We're, the interpenetration of light and truth is starting to chip away at some of these people who have been indoctrinated, but there may be a heart beneath their indoctrination, right? And some of them are just indoctrinated, and they're NPCs, and there's probably very little redemption there.
Well, here's the beautiful thing. I love that you're talking about this, because the highest outcome for our notices, if they had been effective, was not that these people were like crushed and destroyed financially. It would be that they come on board with us, right? This is God's will, that as many souls as possible are going to wake up and be redeemed, come to goodness. Right? Satan has a claim on our soul saying, these ones aren't good. Look, we can corrupt them. You just dangle a little of what they want in their face, and then they're going to sell their soul. But God says, no, they're good. Right? They can do good. They can make moral decisions. They know right from wrong. They can walk in a way that doesn't intend to cause harm in any way. We can do this. Right? We're still working on it. But this is, so that's what we want for perpetrators. It's a beautiful shift, because otherwise you are their perpetrator. And this at the level of the unconscious, even though you're not aware of it, it still is a crazy dynamic, because as soon as you're trying to, you actually give them greater license to kill. If you go after them, even if it's all right in a lawful manner, but they're going to act like you're trying to kill them. And then how are they going to respond? With more violence, right? So having them in my heart, like, wanting them to come to that kind of awakening, like, oh my God, I had no idea. Look, there's 28 pages of evidence to why I'm causing harm, and I think I'm going to go the different direction. So to me, that's the ultimate goal for everything. And, it's interesting you're talking about that lawyer and that judge. I do finally know firsthand one lawyer who's come forward. She hasn't actually spoken out, in public like you do, but a little bit behind the scenes now. And I might not have talked to a lawyer, but now I'm so incredibly happy and even honored that she would have chosen me to speak to and start putting her neck on the line, like we all are at this stage. And, so there are, as long as there's the shred of the soul, then they, even the worst criminal, that's the story that I don't know very well, but, the two brothers, one that stayed with the father, the prodigal son story. And so the one that stayed with the father was really virtue signaling out of fear of losing approval of the dad. Whereas the other one went out and got royally humbled. Got crushed, and came back in a humbled state. And he became the favored son for that reason. Yeah. And so that's all of our potential is always to come into honor in a way that, oh, okay, I was out of honor. Now that I see it, I'm going to do something different. And the work that I'm doing right now, especially with, if you don't mind, I'll talk about an offering that I have coming up at the end of this month. So it's a course that I've done before. I think I even talked to you about it, called Primal Power. Those 5 basic archetypes that are universal to everyone. They're highly weaponized against us. The prostitute, the victim, the saboteur that makes us, so afraid of freedom that we shoot ourselves in the foot. The child archetype we talked about, that is afraid of purpose and betrayal and abandonment. The masculine feminine archetypes, that is, it's where our power is. right? Within ourself, when they work together, it's like a galvanic cell, right? It's creating electricity, power, wholeness. It births, has the ability to give new creation, life. And so this is what I saw for the truth community. More than 80 people, almost 100 people have been through this course, 80 in groups and another 20 one-on-one. And now I'm offering it specifically for those who are interested in law. Because these, right? Yeah, these ones have a very special, what do you call it, challenge to get past their fears. I had to walk through a firewall of fear to be able to send these notices. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know, who was going to come after me, if they were going to target me or target my kid, especially because I can take it. I'm willing to go down for the cause, but I don't want to cause him to go down.
Sure.
And so I use this work to get past that. And now I want to be there for others. And this is not just for beginners, by the way, because on the other side of it, for those that are already courageous, this work is exhausting. It can become very mechanical, and you can do it out of resentment. I know very well. And so I want to help them as well to get to a high energy. And we're using the Bible. This is something Jackie Milne, who's come into my world, she's from the Northwest Territories, has an extraordinary background, amazing experiences. You would love to interview her, by the way. It would be so good if you wanted to introduce her, introduce her to you. And so she's going to help me teach the course, Finding God's Law in the Bible, because the Bible, it's one of those books that they can't get out of law. There is a Bible in every single courtroom everywhere. There's a reason. It's not because they want it there. It's because they can't remove it. It is the foundation for law. And, so there's such a big demonization of the Bible and of Christianity for that exact reason. Because everything we need to know to undo our contracts is in there. And so that's what we're going to be using this course to do. Now, because we're using the Bible, we're using the law, I actually made this course by donation only. So it's not my regular way that I offer coaching and programs. So people can come along if they can't afford it at all. It's funny, 3 people just are signing up as I am talking to you. And if they can't afford it at all, we have a freebie link. If you can make a small donation, great. If you can make a bigger good donation, great. But if you can't afford it at all, then you can come and be part of this. It starts on the 30th of January.
That's great. Well, thanks for doing that. And it's a great resource for people to tap into and support, to learn things, be supported. You're
community and fellowship. Exactly.
Yeah, you're incubating people to take it forward, move it forward, and share it and do it with other people. That's awesome.
Thank you. And it's 100th monkey, right? Like you said earlier, if you see someone else do the hard thing and they didn't die doing it, it's like, oh, well, maybe I can do that too.
Right. Exactly.
And we raise energy together so much more easily than we do separate, right? Sitting here talking to you, I feel full of life. If I was talking to myself, it might not be so dynamic.
Right.
In fact, I know it wouldn't be. Yeah. So that's
well, I'm an only child, so I've talked to myself a lot. I've had some dynamic times, some very undynamic times in some of those conversations. So okay, you've got your ongoing course. How long does this course take? Is this a maiden voyage on this thing for you?
No, I've run 2 rounds since the pandemic started. And then this one is just God's Law edition. So this is where we're bringing in the Bible, using the same 5 archetypes, the same techniques of deprogramming until you learn those very subtle differences between life and death. I know it sounds so easy, like that it should be the simplest thing, but there's so much disguise, and we've been taught everything upside down. We've been taught life is death and death is life.
Right.
That freedom is slavery. Slavery is freedom, right? And so the work I notice people can use very quickly. It's easy. There's no indoctrination around it. It's just simply, you come face to face with the thing that's not true, that's not in alignment, that is fear-based. And you say, oh, I'm not going to take that baggage forward with me because time is short and we have a destination we need to get to called freedom. Right. And you just start deciding, and you raise your energy, not for its own sake, but as you get higher and higher in energy, you get more and more courage.
Right.
And you can do the deeper healing work and ultimately come into this place of redemption to make God's claim good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, that you can be a moral, right person, purposeful person in service. It's a tall order, but
Right.
God's
Right.
holding
Yeah.
out that we can all do this.
Yeah. Well, this is it. This is the call. This is the time.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people are being moved out of inertia, fear, and complacency.
Yeah.
This is what the social condition is squeezing them out of. It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Not a bad
Exactly.
thing.
It's highly polarizing, which is
Yeah.
so good for us because
Right.
otherwise we're all a bunch of fence sitters. We like little new age, we like a little Christianity, we like a little archetypes, we like a little,
Right.
all of this kind of stuff, but we never commit to a path and go hard on it. And
Right.
now that's to me a much bigger possibility that that could happen.
So we don't have a lot of time left. I mean, well,
Okay.
we do. I mean, we could run this show for another hour, but I
I
wanted
don't,
to,
yeah.
but I wanted to ask you something.
Mhm.
And this is, I've been sort of playing with this, not just an idea, but also a reality that touched my own life inside of my head. And it has to do with this concept of allies and who's on our team and who's not on our team, and how do we deal with somebody who might be in a strange place that we have to figure out, well, can I trust this person to be enough on my team so that I can put this other question aside for now that I may have about him or her and what their real intent is. So let me give you an example of a couple of these things.
Mhm.
When I was running for city council, which was last year, which was a very interesting experience.
Wow.
I went by my name that I use here. I didn't go by my quote unquote birth name or my government name.
Mm.
And there's a reason why I didn't do that, because on a certain level, I wanted to be transparent. Like, if this is who I am in this world, well, that's who I'll be in that world too. Right. And so if you want to find out about who I am, all you have to do is look up my name. Right. I could have used the name of my license, and some people may not have been able to figure that out. Right. If they worked a little bit, it wouldn't be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was a guy that I was running with and against. There were two candidates that they had seats to fill. And I'd seen this guy at a couple of meetings, and he hit all the right talking points, and he was very articulate, and he was a quote unquote Christian. Not that it really matters to me, honestly, but it does here in this town.
Okay.
And he was up. He had a good head on his shoulders. I thought, man, this guy I think could be a really worthwhile candidate. I ran into his wife at the grocery store during the election. I talked him up in line. She was behind me. I talked him up to the checker in line, right? I said, yeah, he's a great guy. You may want to consider voting for him, right? Or me, I mean, so it wasn't like I was just like putting him up there. So we had these forums. So the first forum was run by I think it was the Rotary Club. I think it was Rotary, which is an international organization. So we're on this forum. It's this Zoom forum. And I think I did really well. I did well. I had ideas. I had a platform, and in an environment like that, I can usually come across pretty well. I think I did too well, because that guy and two other guys, one of the guys being the little head of the Republican Party here in Fredericksburg, they decided that they were going to do some research on me, and they found my website, and they found that I was an astrologer, and, I had these, kind of crazy ideas.
Right. In the Christian community, that doesn't go over well, eh?
No. So what happened is that day, now that I think about this, it's really interesting. That day, they went after this guy who's the head of the Tea Party here in town. And three of them harassed him on the phone and tried to get him to either not support me, or even better, denounce me.
Hmm.
Now, here's what's really, and I hadn't really put the two together here, is that guy, I was at a Tea Party meeting that night. And so because I was at the meeting and I was going to speak there because they were giving the local candidates a little stage time, I also had to be in this forum with the Democratic Party. So I went off to a side room with my cell phone, and I was dialing into the Zoom meeting. The guy who was there, who's the head of the Tea Party, he did not tell me about that experience. Now that I think about it, that was an interesting, like, why didn't he pull me aside and tell me, hey, Robert, I'm just giving you a heads up. I got really harassed by James and Mo. Like, they were really trying to do a number on me today about you. He didn't. So I didn't know that this had happened. During that forum, this guy, James, who was speaking in front of me, and, MP, right? So it was going alphabetical. He said, there's only one candidate that I would tell you not to vote for. And he said my name. Mm. And then he said that I was an occultist, a Satanist. Mm-hmm. I had a cult following. And so, we blamed the Democrats for a lot of problems, but I have to give it to them. In that moment, they basically stopped him in his tracks and said, look, we're not going to allow that. Mm. Right. So now I had to figure out, well, what I was going to say. I mean, do I want to address it? Do I not? It was a very interesting moment because I had to get my shit together really fast because I had to talk to these people who were going to ask me questions. So I had to make a decision. I'm not going to address it. I'm not going to answer that question or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And then later on, his wife started to call me out on Facebook saying that I was a Satanist. So the reason I'm sharing this story is this guy an ally? I mean, on some level, we agreed on the big picture, freedom, truth. He spoke out against the mandates, too much government. But then when push came to shove, we were not on the same bus. Mm-hmm. We just weren't. And mm-hmm. I've encountered this in a number of different situations. I'll give you two more examples, one close to home with you. So I caught a little bit of heat for talking about Robert Malone, who I'm sure you know of. I mean, he's this guy that, is supposedly the father of mRNA. And I've always had some doubts about Robert Malone.
Okay.
I just have. It's like, dude, you've been working on this all your life. And at some point you didn't think that this was going to be a real issue. And then I've looked at the people he's worked for and the grant money he took, and let's go down to Zika, let's go down to Brazil, and we'll shoot these people up with this, was it DTaP or right? I mean, we're gonna give them that. They're going to exhibit these symptoms that look like this shrunken head, encephalopathy or whatever you call it. Oh, look, we've got Zika now. Oh, now we got to go back to the United States, start a shell company, and then get money to treat Zika. I mean, that's the model in a nutshell, right? And he's been up to his crown chakra in this stuff. So I guess you can have a Paul on Damascus sort of, Saul Paul Damascus moment, I guess, right? So your cats agree with me. But again, I'm like, I don't know about this guy, and I'm not sure I can consider him an ally. Mm-hmm. And I caught a little bit of flack for that. And I'm okay with catching the flack. That's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. Closer to you, you've got Chris Sky. Mm-hmm. And Chris Sky is, he's the John the Baptist of the mask movement and the vax movement. And he was credited early on for predicting all this stuff, right?
Controlled up.
What's that?
Controlled up.
Right. So this is the question here. The question is, how do we remedy who's an ally and who's not an ally? And to what extent do we want to say, okay, I'm willing to kind of look the other way with this person for now, because maybe they're at 65 or 70% of what we need. Maybe they hit 70%, but there's that 30% that's kind of a big gap. Or maybe it's 95%, but that 5% of the 95 is a huge gap. Where are you on this, and how do we resolve some of these things?
It's a great question, and it's been so prevalent for months and months, especially, leading some groups, not because I'm so knowledgeable, I'm just willing to hold groups together.
Right.
And then, so the question, I've had incredible conflict erupt around me. And, there are cases where people have actually infiltrated, they've come in to create conflict for that. You can see in the end, they were trying to break it up. There were times when I was like, I have to quit. This has all gone to hell. I have to just close these groups. But then I think like, oh no, that's exactly what they want me to do. So I'm not doing that.
Right.
And, just walking with really strong boundaries in a way that like, you just simply know who you are, what you stand for, what you're willing to, the standard that you're willing to hold on the moral scale. And at the same time, understand that everybody is in a place. It's like you said, maybe they have 60% or 70%. And it doesn't make you blind to the 30% that's off. But we're in a place right now, especially, you hope that everyone would start to be humble.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
because so much of the conflict comes from pride that they, I'm right. I have the goods. That's, less of the infiltrators that have actually evil intentions. This is more us who just don't find our way. The conflict among Christians is off the charts too, right? And that's historically been for many, many centuries already. So, and this was a very big question. I started to think like, am I in a den of lions here? I'm getting myself into all of these places. If I had to go back and, for example, for all of the interviews that I've done, if I had to remove the ones where there was something I didn't agree with, I think I would take them all down. 100%. Right. So am I just going to spend the whole life eliminating people? At one point, I did a pendulum swing from the elimination process to the other side where I decided, okay, I'm going to make everybody my allies. Even if they're not my allies, I'm going to make it so. And that felt powerful for about 48 hours. and then I had another breakthrough. I completely let that go because that was an attachment. That was fear. I needed allies in order to survive.
Right.
Right. And that's as soon as you're running from death, then you're cooked. Right. And you lose all of your energy. So I had a really good coach in my world at the time, and she coached me to just feel like, if you have to walk alone, and that's where your personal power is, then, stop wanting to rely on allies. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, having done that, I feel like things have got much more rich in terms of my allies. It is drawing people to me, the right people. And where there was a lot of conflict before, it's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And here's, it's very easy to alienate those who are innocently just trying to grow up into certain awareness, So I've come full circle to the Bible and Christianity. Well, as you know, that people judge you for astrology and even the archetypes. I'll come under attack for. I've had lots of new age years after the satanic thing. It was all new age and yoga and India and all that kind of stuff. And I was just finding my way and doing my best and doing my work, connecting with Jackie Milne now, who actually came from a lifetime of Christian indoctrination, part of a Christian cult. At a 20-year Christian cult, she broke out of it. That's how she found the law, because she started to see liability on the wall. Mm-hmm. And, so she's coming at it from this perspective of how to walk with a lot more awareness that Christians would call esoteric without having them call you out for being evil. Now, I don't have that danger because I'm coming from, I've got friends like you that are into astrology and divination and the tarot and all of that kind of stuff. That's it, and calling Jesus one of the ascended masters. That's something the New Age really has done very purposefully to take, that very important historical figure out of our front and center. But at the end of the day, I'm learning day by day now to not be the judge, because the Bible says, vengeance is mine, say the Lord. Judge not lest ye be judged.
Right.
We all know what that feels like,
Right.
and then not to turn to them naively and think, oh, is this guy my ally or is he my enemy? Or, but to walk in your own personal authority.
Right. So I agree with that. And that's going to be on a personal level.
Yeah.
On a global level, like somebody like Robert Malone, is Robert
Only know a
Malone?
tiny bit. Like yeah.
But let's just, I mean, he's somebody, he's somebody that comes from, it's kind of like somebody who is used to work with the CIA. It's the same kind of model. They used to work with, but do they ever really stop working with the CIA? I mean, that's the question. So there are people like Robert David Steele, who you might know.
Neither of them really well. No.
They must be an American phenomenon, but
yeah,
but it's like
doing my work.
So Robert Malone was on Joe Rogan, who gets more views than Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson gets more views than anybody else,
right?
In terms of news. So you get Robert Malone on there, and he's now become, by his appearance on Joe Rogan, probably the leading authority for questioning the use of these vaccines that are based on a technology that he did not invent, but he was part of, which is mRNA.
Right.
But,
yeah, that much I'm familiar with. Yeah.
Right. So me, this is just how I operate. I'm like, okay, well, who is this guy? Where did he come from? And what's his intent?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is his intent? Where is he going with this?
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own, that's just my own process that I run on everybody. It doesn't matter. And some people, by the way, most of the people that I give my little green check mark to, they're not people that are really well known. They're people like you, right? Or people like Raw, or people that I have on this show, because number one, I can go like this. I can see eye to eye. I know who you are for the most part. We can talk. I can ask you questions. Yeah, and every now and then there'll be somebody in, quote unquote, I don't use the word authority, but somebody who has exposure or somebody who has some juice, right? And maybe every now and then, that person's interesting. But I don't invest in them. But on the other hand, who does this side have theoretically? Like, who do we have that can be kind of out front as kind of a counterbalance to this narrative? And so do you say, okay, well, again, I'll trust this guy for now, and then we'll sort it out if he turns out to be the Antichrist later or something like that. So for you personally, these are the people that I'm going to walk in my own authority, and I'm going to deal with these people on an individual. I'm talking more about like out there in terms of sort of the global picture or the big stage. Where are you with that?
Yeah, another great question, because I really have come to the place through law by interviewing a whole bunch of now they won't call themselves gurus, but they'd get treated like gurus, right? So we hosted the Choose Freedom Law Summit, which is, by the way, available right now if anybody wants to make a small donation. We have freebie link for that one too. If anyone can't afford it, just let me know. All of that is at my website, bethmartens.com. And so by the end of 30 plus interviews, I'm coming out of it going like, nobody has the answers, but everybody has a piece of the puzzle. Right. And so if I start to, and we love our stage characters, we put them up, and we have the danger there to me is that we have the illusion that they're going to do the work for us, and that people won't be on the ground leading in the way that they could lead, right? So they forfeit all of their personal power, give it over to the guru,
right?
And think, whew, that's handled. Yay! All I have to do is watch all their videos and then just go and do whatever, right? Whereas to me, a much greater vision would be we all find some inner king energy and step up and lead, right? If it's your family, or it's in a school situation, or it's in a workplace, or it's a whole community, maybe taking control of some kind of food situation that's going on, or things that are super in our face relevant right now. That's the kind of turning away. So gurus are not wrong. I just hosted Andrew Kaufman on my channel last night. He could be considered a guru. He's got a huge audience.
Right.
Just making a film, terrain, but I'm not having it on as a means of worship. I'm having it on so that he could inspire others to take action.
Right.
We talked to him about the law thing. He was thrilled. It turns out he's on the same track. And he knows law is one of those things. It doesn't matter how many gurus there are. No one could ever do it for you.
Right.
Same with your spiritual life. You can follow the guru, but if you don't actually do the inner work, then it doesn't matter, right? And they are easily taken off course, right? They have lots to lose compared to myself. I've got modest life. I don't have a whole lot to lose, so I don't have a whole lot of fear of losing. But when you get big and you've gained a lot, it's more difficult.
Right.
And so everybody has the same level of difficulty. But if you're going to take leadership, if you want a guru, go right to the source. Go to God.
Right.
That's where all the juice is. That's the real thing. And you're never going to be let down and disappointed, because we imbue so much of our expectations and don't let me down is the unconscious thought, but they're going to let you down. They're going to. It's a given.
Yeah.
So then, and I apologize. I'm going to have to go. I can see the time.
That's okay. Go do your thing. Thanks for sharing your time with us today, though.
Yeah, my great pleasure. My great pleasure. I will, if it's okay with you, I'll just share my website where people can. I know I've talked about a lot of different things, and then if anyone wants to come and take me up on anything, you can just one-stop-bethmartens.com. That's MARTENS.com.
Yeah, that was the website that we showed earlier, and I'll show it again on the way out today. Beth, thank you so much for your time and your service. You're doing God's work, as they say.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a leap of faith. I keep shaking my head and can't believe how much work I have on my plate, but it's the work to be done. That's
absolutely.
And it's now, it's not later. So yeah.
Right. It's all now.
No, I really appreciate you bringing me on today, Robert. It's been lovely to talk to you. I like your perspective a lot, and I love that you're covering the law, because that's it's becoming popular now. It wasn't popular, and we're changing the face of that.
It's an in thing. Get in on the in thing.
Get in on it. Exactly. Yeah. No one can do it for you. You got to do it yourself.
All right, Beth. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch up with you again sometime soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right. That was Beth Martens. Wow. An hour of intense conversation around the time we're in, her own personal journey, and the level of commitment. That woman's committed. That's a level of commitment. And we'll go back to the first hour. I had no idea that Ra was working on a book, 400 pages. That's something. That's really, you know what that is? That's commitment. That's commitment. And commitment is something that you can have, and you can have it for anything. You can commit yourself to growing a garden. You could commit yourself to whatever. And the commitment can be something that can be very liberating. So 2 examples, 2 people that are committed to their path and service to others. And that's where we're at. Okay, so I do want to thank Ra Castaldo for coming on. And you could find him at the Mystic Spiral. That's his website, Beth Martens, bethmartens.com. You can find me at robertphoenix.com. And also 15 Minutes of Flame on my other site, Monday through Thursday. And then Sunday night, we'll be back on the other channel here on YouTube, Sunday Night Astro Live. And I'm going to have Lindsay from Roadways. We'll be doing a simulcast, and it'll be cool. So we'll have a little astrology, a little tarot magic. Should be a fun night. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Take care.